please stay home. Home is the safest place.
A holiday warning from doctors. What the governor is asking you to do and not do for 21 days to help slow the spread. The vaccine will play a key role in finally stopping the pandemic. A look at Ohio's plan to vaccinate. And people in one industry are not happy about being left out of the first round of vaccines. Why funeral directors say they should be included in Group 1A. Thank you so much for joining me on this morning. This is Face the State. I'm Tracy Townsend. Ohioans must continue to stay in at night. This week, Governor Mike DeWine extended that 10 p.m. curfew to January 2nd. The curfew was first issued on November 19th for 21 days. The governor says there is a variance to the curfew for events with teams and spectators, such as Monday night football games with the Browns and the Bengals. DeWine says that retail establishments need to be closed and people should be home while this curfew is in effect. The goal is to extend the curfew to just after the new year, and the hope is that that's going to prevent another spike in cases over the holiday season. Angela Reichert explains why DeWine says the next 3 weeks are critical to the fight against the virus.
In a season meant for celebrating, people are grieving. On Thursday, the Ohio Department of Health reported more than 10,000 newly confirmed cases of COVID-19, and 430 more Ohioans are now in the hospital.
We cannot afford, on the very eve of a safe and effective vaccination, to further overwhelm our hospitals and healthcare providers with a holiday tsunami.
We saw what happened Thanksgiving. People continued to travel despite health leaders urging folks to stay home. Now, already overwhelmed hospitals are bracing for a holiday wave, with Christmas around the corner.
As Ohioans, we can get through this if we work together and do what we need to do in the next 21 days.
Governor Mike DeWine released his new Stay Safe Ohio protocols. They're things we should all be doing heading into the new year. Staying at home, wearing our masks, social distancing, washing our hands, working remotely, celebrating safely, not eating with people outside of our home, limiting travel, being safe at weddings and funerals, and during the holidays.
Remember, older family members and those with other medical conditions are particularly vulnerable to serious illness with COVID-19. Celebrate with them by phone or Zoom or letters. Let them know how much you love them by being virtual.
Sure, it may not be what we want to hear, but we need to listen.
Again, more than 7,000 Ohio families are going to be mourning a loss this season, but it doesn't have to continue.
Reporting in Columbus, Angela Reichert, 10 TV News.
And we know there will be many people trying to make it work and see family for the holiday season. Abby Lorico found out what you need to consider.
To have the 12 days of Christmas in 2020, you may be considering the 14 days of quarantine.
Yes, somebody can do that, but everybody has to do that. So if you want 10 people to get together, that means 10 people are doing 14 days. True quarantine is not going anywhere, and that's hard.
How about if everyone gets tested?
The key to remember, it's a snapshot on that day. 2 days later, it could be a complete different scenario or a different story.
All gatherings should include as few households coming together as distantly as possible, especially if you're including any older or high-risk loved ones.
Keep the gathering short. Maybe it's a 20-minute visit. People are in masks, you see each other, you share your gifts, you share time, you don't do any meals, but you're just around each other.
What are some of the blind spots that you are concerned people might be having, though? They have the best of intentions and think they're doing everything right. What are some things that they might not be and not even realize it?
We all have moments when we haven't been at the best behaviors in mitigating the risk. I think outside is safer than inside, but I think we believe that it's completely safe. You know, people that don't live in your house should be in a mask. We think that we're going to have these holiday gatherings and they don't have a time limit. Well, we know what that leads to.
Though Dr. Newland and the CDC say virtual is still the best option,
there are ways to gather safely. They cannot be the type of gatherings we've had in every year prior to this.
Many people are banking on the COVID-19 vaccine to bring an end to this pandemic. Next week, Ohio is supposed to receive its first shipment of vaccine doses. That first batch would be from Pfizer. They're supposed to be here by Tuesday. Hundreds of thousands more doses would come from both Pfizer and Moderna later in December. Here's who would get the vaccine first: healthcare workers, first responders, and people living and working in group settings like nursing homes. But with both Moderna and Pfizer vaccines in Ohio, how will you know what you're getting? Listen to Columbus Public Health Commissioner Dr. Mashika Roberts.
When we get the vaccine, we will be given for lack of a better word, identification card that when we vaccinate the individual, we'll give them the card. That way they can keep it with them. And so when they're due for their next vaccine, whether they come back to the health department or happen to go someplace else to get vaccinated, they'd be able to show their card, which would tell the individual which vaccine they got. So their second dose could be of the same brand.
You most likely have lots of questions about this vaccine, and there is a lot of good information and some not so good information online. Cutting through all of that misinformation is the job of the Verify team. This morning, Jason Puckett looks at claims surrounding the vaccine and plasma donations.
Viewer Brian N. asked us if someone will still be able to donate plasma after getting the COVID vaccine. That's a great question, Brian. Convalescent plasma has been a useful tool in treating COVID patients. They use plasma donations from someone who had the virus to give helpful antibodies to new COVID patients. So let's verify. Will you be able to donate plasma if you get a COVID vaccine? Our sources are the American Association of Blood Banks, or AABB, the FDA, the American Red Cross, and Dr. Shmuel Shohem, an associate professor at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. So all of our sources say blood donations are fine. But when it comes to convalescent plasma,
according to the current FDA guidance, they did not recommend people that have gotten the vaccine to be donors.
The FDA wrote that in this joint guidance memo from the FDA and the AABB. They say people who get the vaccine can still donate blood, but not plasma, quote, because of the uncertainty regarding the quality of the immune response produced by such investigational vaccines, end quote. When we asked the Red Cross, they confirmed people who receive a COVID vaccine, quote, are not eligible to donate convalescent plasma. So back to Brian's question. Can you donate plasma if you get a COVID vaccine? No, but that could change. Dr. Shoham told us deferring plasma donors is really just a precaution until more testing can be done.
And I think it should be a priority to find that out, because people that have had the vaccine could potentially be an important source of plasma.
Folks, if you have other claims or questions you want us to take a look into, send us an email. With your Verify, I'm Jason Puckett.
Two doctors at The Ohio State University's College of Veterinary Medicine have developed vaccine technology. It could protect against two viruses at once. They took a measles vaccine and added the COVID-19 spike protein. The result is a vaccine that is shown to protect against both viruses in animals. Yes, the next step, human testing, and that's why they've partnered with a global vaccine company to develop this further. So why did they pick the measles vaccine?
We think measles virus is a very good vaccine because it has a long-standing safety record. It has been instrumental in reducing measles virus worldwide. There were millions of children dying every year because of measles.
And doctors point out the measles vaccine usually protects a person for life. They hope this new vaccine technology would provide long-term protection for COVID-19 too. It would be extremely helpful in developing countries since it carries less demanding refrigeration requirements. Funeral directors in Ohio are upset that they won't be among the first people to get the vaccine. Ohio's selection process contradicts who the CDC says should be first. It says funeral directors are considered high risk, just like healthcare workers. We talk with the local funeral home director.
So we are exposed to all sorts of people that either have the virus, don't know they have the virus, but people, it's not just the dead that we are taking care of who have COVID, but it's also the people that were around them at the time. We have a lot of exposure.
The company saw more funerals in November than it has in its history, which includes the Spanish flu. The Ohio Funeral Directors Association says it's working with the governor to see if, in fact, they can be added to that first wave. Here is the latest COVID-19 risk map for Ohio. Noble, Harrison, and Washington are red for the first time ever. You'll notice Franklin County is still in the red after being in that higher risk category, purple, just 2 weeks ago. And because of that, the Hilliard School District will go back to hybrid learning on Monday. They'd moved to all virtual 2 weeks ago after Franklin County reached a level 4 risk. A Columbus nightclub cited for health violations after a packed concert has been ordered to shut down. This week, the Columbus City Attorney secured an immediate temporary shutdown of the Aftermath, which is over on the city's far east side. State investigators say they found more than 500 people at a concert on December 5th disregarding COVID-19 health orders and social distancing requirements. The city says the shutdown is in the interest of community health. Club owners have not yet responded to our request for comment. 10 TV's Bryant Somerville spoke with the man overseeing security, who says this is all being blown out of proportion.
Days after a Columbus club was cited for what is being called egregious violations of health orders, some are saying it's not as bad as it was made out to be.
They are making it a bigger deal than what it really is because they have an opinion on how they feel people should live their lives.
Brandon Carter owns Rain Security Protection Services and says he was helping to promote Saturday's concert with musical act Trey Songz.
There were definitely folks with masks on. They made it seem like there was nobody with masks on at all.
The Ohio State Highway Patrol investigative unit says the club, called Aftermath, received a citation for improper conduct and disorderly activities, and that agents observed violations of health orders with about 500 people inside with no attempts to maintain social distancing and no physical barriers. The report says people were standing, walking freely, and sharing alcoholic beverages from the same bottle. And most of the crowd and employees were not wearing facial coverings.
It's just wrong to put the total blame on the industry that a lot of us make money from.
Carter says he employs about 30 people and his business has taken a hit since COVID began. He says it's not easy, the idea some people have of simply finding another job during the pandemic. He also says he cares about people's health.
People just need to be as safe as possible, but let people live their lives, man. That doesn't mean that people don't care just because they choose to go out and hang out.
He's also quick to point out other places, grocery stores, big box stores, where, yes, masks are required, but social distancing rules are encouraged but not strictly enforced. He wonders why that's okay, but concerts are not.
I just hate how people try to just come down on people like they're perfect people and make it seem like it's like a stupid thing to want to be out and, again, make money when this is the way that you make money to take care of your family.
In Columbus, Bryant Somerville, 10 TV News.
This case will be presented to the Ohio Liquor Commission for possible penalties. Penalties could include fines and a suspension of the club's liquor license. Now, we're told the Ohio investigative unit sent agents to the club after getting information that this was going to happen. We did ask, why didn't they shut it down? A spokesperson said in part they have the authority to issue citations after a violation. OIU does not have the authority to shut an establishment down prior to the event. The U.S. House of Representatives has passed a bill to keep the government open for a while, but there's still work to be done regarding COVID relief and a spending bill that's overdue. We'll hear from some Ohio congressional reps. Welcome back. The U.S. House of Representatives easily passed a one-week government-wide funding bill that sets a new December 18th deadline for Congress to wrap up both the COVID-19 relief bill and a $1.4 trillion catch-all spending bill that's also overdue. But now a major hurdle for the bipartisan COVID-19 aid package, as Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says Republican senators won't support a key compromise. It includes a slimmed-down liability shield for companies from virus-related lawsuits in exchange for adding $160 billion for cash-strapped states and cities that Democrats want. Last week, I talked with Central Ohio's 3 representatives to the United States Congress: Steve Stivers from the 15th District, Troy Balderson from the 12th, and Joyce Beatty representing the 3rd District.
It's about getting help to the people that need it. I think the aid we need to give now needs to be a little more targeted than what we did last time. Last time, any business could get a Paycheck Protection Program loan. Now I think we need to probably have some qualifiers. It needs to be a business whose revenues have been reduced as a result of COVID-19. So many businesses are in that position where their revenues are down 30, 50%. There's also a pending crisis of people that are that could have foreclosures and,
and
could be kicked out of their homes, renters that could be evicted. So we've got to work on those things too. And I'm for a temporary rental assistance program that will help those folks stay in their home during this crisis. And then obviously helping them as we try to get them jobs as we get people back to work too.
Vaccines are coming into that, making sure that we get funding to these hospitals. You know, I both know, I know that you've had conversations, and I speak with, I have a couple of doctor friends at Ohio Health and some of my rural hospitals. They're greatly being impacted right now, and people know that. So those are also that they're not really the hard part of the discussion that's going on right now. So again, continue to focus on what we all can agree on and what we all needs to get done.
Where are you on protection for people from foreclosure and rent out of the pandemic?
You know, I'm for that. Who you know, we want to be. And look, I need to express to you too and your viewers that employers are doing the same thing. I can't tell you how many business owners I was, you know, out visiting, talking to, having discussions, and they were also giving money to their employees to make sure they had rent. Because employers, we don't talk about this a lot, but employers want to keep their employees. It's not something, you know, especially, it's hard to find good people to work right now, and that's part of the whole workforce development.
One of the things we want to make sure is that we do justice to tackling the COVID-19. When we think of the strain, it's not only put on the nation, but when we come back home and we think about Ohio, the number of African Americans that have been disproportionately affected, when we look at the number of our community, all citizens who are dying from COVID-19, and what happens as a result of it, the ramifications, you know, the economy, when we look at the social injustices that are all centered around it, we need to make sure that we're putting more monies into relief for everyday people, for small businesses, because our economy is in trouble. And yes, we have to keep people safe and healthy. So when I look at that, and then all of the injustices, whether that's looking at the eviction rates, if we're looking at the mortgages, what we're hearing about every day, and it affects our children. So when you think about parents not knowing whether their child is going to be able to go to school, or the parents who don't know if their children are going to be able to wake up without being hungry or homeless.
Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost is urging the United States Supreme Court to accept the case of Texas versus Pennsylvania. He wants the Supreme Court to rule on the Constitution's Electors Clause, which says that state legislatures, not the executive or judicial branches, set the rules for selecting electors for the Electoral College. The Attorney General says that in several states, executives or judges changed rules on the eve of the election. Yost said in a statement, "It is not unreasonable to wonder, and many millions of Americans do, whether those hastily implemented changes expose the election systems to vulnerabilities." Public schools might have a new funding plan heading their way. The plan to get schools the help they need and the deadline the Ohio Senate has to beat. The pandemic is still causing big problems when it comes to unemployment in Ohio. This last week, more than 36,000 people made first-time claims for unemployment. To give you some perspective, the total number of initial jobless claims filed in Ohio over the last 38 weeks was more than the combined total of those filed during the last 4 years. So far, the state has given out more than $7.4 billion in unemployment benefits. Public schools might have a new funding plan heading their way. House Bill 305 recently passed through the Ohio House of Representatives. It's now sitting in the Senate, and superintendents are hoping it keeps going. They say it would allow more equality in how schools are funded. 10 TV's Krista Frost is breaking down how it could work.
This is a fast-growing area.
Meaning the Licking Heights School District is going to need more resources and more money. The problem?
In our school district, and like many, especially in central Ohio, many of the school districts are considered capped. So that means that we're supposed to be receiving money, but we don't receive the money.
To be more specific,
But this shows how much the state says we should be receiving and how much state funding we receive.
Over 8 years, that's $72 million the district hasn't received. This is because of a formula which decides how public schools are funded. Educational leaders say it's created inequalities and was ruled unconstitutional 4 times by the Ohio Supreme Court. House Bill 305 could change that.
Number one, it will base the foundation amount, the amount that schools receive per student, on what is the actual cost of providing a high quality education to every student. And secondly, it provides an equitable way to divide the responsibility between the state and local communities.
It passed through the House last week, and superintendents like Wagner hope it'll keep going.
But at 150 students increasing each year, and then if you look at 25 students, then obviously we're going to need 6 new teachers every year.
So he can hire the resources the district needs to provide quality education. In Columbus, Krista Frost, 10 TV News.
Another bill lawmakers are considering would keep guns in the hands of teachers. If passed, it would return the right to school districts to allow teachers to be armed, but it's without the training that courts say is necessary. Reporter Kevin Landers explains what that means.
In order to prevent the next mass school shooting, supporters of a bill making its way through the Ohio State House say teachers need to be armed.
We have got to quit letting our children get slaughtered in schools.
Jim Irvine is a vocal supporter of Senate Bill 317. He says Ohio schools have always had the power to arm teachers if they choose.
If someone comes in that's a threat, nothing changes. The school will deal with threats the same way they do without armed staff. Very few threats raise to the level of lethal force.
Opponents of the bill say schools should be the last place where more guns are needed.
First and foremost is the security of the gun.
Libby Weatherholt is a retired Dublin School District teacher where she taught for 30 years.
The teachers should be there protecting the children, not going out looking for an intruder.
What we know is bad people come to our schools because they are soft targets where no one fights back.
Under Senate Bill 317, teachers who want to carry a gun can do so without peace officer training. That requires more than 700 hours of training, something a state appeals court says is required. That ruling is now under appeal to the Ohio Supreme Court.
Schools have the authority to control who has a firearm in their buildings and what training they have to comply with. That's always been the law.
Supporters of the bill say its intent is not to replace school resource officers, but to complement them. Opponents don't see it that way.
It's just not necessary. We don't need guns there.
It's needed because the school resource officer can't be in every school all the time. Very few of our districts have a school resource officer in every one of their school buildings.
Kevin Landers, 10 TV News.
Supporters of the bill believe it will pass before the end of this year and are confident Governor Mike DeWine will sign it into law. We do thank you all for joining us today for Face the State. Remember, if it affects you, your family, and Ohio, we're here to make sure those accountable face the state.